The Velthary Academy of Interstellar Combat was considered the most prestigious military institution in seven-star systems. Its Deathworld simulation, officially designated the Careth-9 Endurance Protocol, had a completion rate of 11%. Across 42 years of operation, only a handful of non-human species had ever finished it. Humans were not expected to be among them. That assumption was about to get complicated. Cadet instructor Zorithvel watched the pre-simulation briefing from behind reinforced observation glass. 46 cadets stood in the staging hall, representatives from 15 species handpicked from their respective academies. Every one of them was elite. Every one of them had survived preliminary evaluations that would have killed a lesser soldier. His eyes settled on the two humans near the back. Caleb Vaughn stood with his arms crossed, scanning the room like he was memorizing exits. Medium height, unremarkable build, brown eyes that moved with quiet calculation. He'd said almost nothing since arrival. The dossier described him as a former frontier survival specialist, raised on a colony world with irregular atmospheric pressures and seasonal predator migrations. Zorithvel had flagged him as potentially interesting. The second human, Sophia Knight, was the one that made Zorithvel uneasy in ways he couldn't fully articulate. She stood slightly apart from the group, hands loose at her sides, posture relaxed to the point of looking bored. Her file read like a warning label. Youngest licensed wilderness tracker on her home station, certified in 3 forms of emergency medicine, 3 documented survival incidents that had each killed other members of her teams. She had survived all 3 by herself. She was chewing something. Zorithvel clicked his mandibles. Chewing. During pre-simulation briefing, the Careth-9 protocol loaded across 4 biomes, each more hostile than the last. Razor-spined vegetation that detected heat signatures and oriented toward them. Atmospheric acid pockets that activated during temperature drops. Fauna engineered to hunt by fear chemical signature. The more frightened a creature, the more aggressively it was pursued. Gravity fluctuations in the final zone that alternated between crushing and near-null conditions every 90 seconds. Most cadets failed in the first biome. The current record for elimination was 45 minutes. The previous simulation had eliminated all 45 non-human cadets within 6 hours. None had reached the second biome. The simulation began. Within the first 12 minutes, 7 cadets were eliminated. The Razor Flora was faster than expected this cycle, an update Zorithvel had not announced. 4 more were gone by the 30-minute mark, caught in an acid pocket that vented early due to a simulated temperature anomaly. Caleb Vaughn moved through the first biome like he had grown up in it. He didn't run from the Razor Flora. He moved sideways, laterally, unpredictably, changing direction every few meters in a pattern that seemed random but kept him just outside the plant's heatlock range. He used a broken branch as a temperature decoy, heating it against exposed rock and tossing it to draw the plants while he slipped past. Zorithvel leaned forward. Sophia Knight did something different. She walked. Not carefully, not cautiously. She simply walked, at an almost casual pace, directly through the densest concentration of Razor Flora in the entire first biome. The plants oriented toward her, then paused. Recalibrated. The heat signature from her body was inconsistent with their targeting parameters. She was generating less thermal output than the ambient environment. It took Zorithvel a moment to understand what he was seeing. She had slowed her metabolism. Not through technology. There were no implants in her file, no chemical assists. She had simply decided to run cooler. He pulled up her biometric feed. Heart rate, 41. Core temperature, 35.6 degrees. Breathing, 5 cycles per minute. She walked through the most dangerous section of the first biome as if she were taking a stroll, her body convinced by sheer willpower and training, that it was in a state of deep rest. The fauna that hunted by fear pheromone didn't look at her twice. By hour 3, 29 cadets had been eliminated. 8 remained when the second biome activated, Caleb and Sophia among them. The second biome introduced the predators. They were large, 6-limbed, and hunted through a combination of chemoreception and subsonic vibration. They were exquisitely calibrated to detect panic. 2 cadets were gone within minutes of the fauna's first appearance. Their fear responses spiked before they even saw the creatures, and that was enough. Caleb encountered one directly. He didn't freeze. He didn't run. He held completely still and began making sounds, low, rhythmic, percussive sounds with his mouth. The predator circled him, confused. The sounds weren't threatening, weren't fearful. They were unfamiliar, outside the creature's behavioral database. After 40 seconds of circling, the predator disengaged and moved on. Zorithvel's secondary observer, a senior Velthari cadet named Marithlo, turned to him. What was he doing? Beatboxing, said Zorithvel. He didn't elaborate, because he didn't know how to explain it. Sophia's encounter with the predators was less dramatic and somehow more unsettling. She saw one from 30 meters away, crouched behind vegetation. She looked at it for a moment with an expression of mild academic interest. Then she reached into her pack and removed a piece of dried food, one of the ration bars she'd been chewing since the briefing, and began eating it, sitting cross-legged on the ground, watching the predator with the calm attention of a naturalist. The predator watched her back. After nearly 3 minutes, it turned and walked away. Her fear pheromone output during the encounter, undetectable. Her biometrics read like she was watching something mildly entertaining. Not dismissive, not suppressed. She genuinely had not been afraid. She's not suppressing fear, Marithlo said quietly. There's nothing to suppress. Zorithvel said nothing. He was thinking about that colony she'd grown up near, the one tagged in her file as a Class 7 death world. The fauna there didn't have behavioral databases. It just tried to kill you constantly, from the day you were born, until you either learned its rhythms or you didn't survive long enough to learn anything at all. She hadn't spent years training for dangerous environments. She had spent her entire life inside one. The third and fourth biomes fell the same way. Systematically. Unhurried. Caleb navigated the acid pocket field by mapping the thermal vents through reflection on exposed rock surfaces. He found the pattern in 11 minutes, then guided Sophia through along a safe corridor he'd mapped by throwing pebbles and watching the atmospheric reaction. He was, Zorithvel realized, also a scientist. Not because he'd been trained in atmospheric chemistry, but because surviving hostile environments for years had made pattern recognition as instinctive as breathing. The gravity fluctuation zone, the final section, the one that had eliminated cadets from every species that had ever attempted Kareth. 9. Activated with its usual 90-second cycle. High gravity. Crushing. Then null. Then high again. Most cadets were undone by the cognitive load, trying to track the cycle while navigating terrain while managing physical stress. The body and mind simply fragmented under the accumulated weight of everything. Sophia found a pace. She moved in rhythm with the cycle. High gravity, low and compact, slow deliberate steps. Her center of gravity adjusted with an almost mechanical precision. Null phase, 3 seconds of controlled float, pushing off fixed surfaces with measured force, never allowing drift. Back to high, already in position, already set. Caleb watched her for one full cycle, read her rhythm, and matched it. They crossed the zone in just over 4 minutes. The simulation terminated. In the debrief room, Zorithvel faced both humans across a long table. The results panel behind him showed the data, 2 completions out of 46 cadets. The third best completion time in the history of the Kareth 9 protocol. He didn't speak for a long moment. Cadet Knight, he said finally. At what point during the simulation were you concerned you might not complete it? Sophia tilted her head slightly, as if genuinely considering the question from an unfamiliar angle. I wasn't, she said. It was harder than my home station's eastern ridge, but the predators were less aggressive than the local fauna there, and the acid pockets had a readable pattern once Caleb mapped the vents. She paused. The gravity zone was interesting, though. I'd never done that specific cycle before. Interesting. Zorithvel wrote that word down in his notes and underlined it twice. He turned to Caleb. And you? Caleb's expression was measured, thoughtful. Biome 2. The predators. For about 30 seconds, I wasn't sure the vocalizations would work. He shrugged. But I've used distraction calls on rougher fauna back home, so I gave it a try. Zorithvel set down his stylus. Across the table, 2 humans sat with the quiet, easy manner of people who had gone for a difficult but ultimately manageable hike. No exhaustion in their eyes. No residual tension in their posture. Just the calm, slightly tired satisfaction of a problem that had been solved. He thought about the 44 cadets in recovery bays across the facility. Cadets from species that had survived thousands of years of galactic warfare, orbital bombardment, species-level extinction events. Eliminated. Every single one. And these two had walked through the same simulation discussing predator behavior and vent mapping like it was a field exercise. Dismissed, he said. He watched them leave, then turned back to his notes. He had one more thing to add. Human cadets, recommend immediate review of all Kareth, 9 difficulty parameters. Current calibration appears insufficient. He underlined it 3 times.